Well, hey there, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. Glad you guys stopped by and hang out with me a little bit today. And today we're going to start building up a new kit. Well, a new old kit, at least. So, I recently picked up the re-release of the Tamiya Hotshot. I almost picked up the Super Shot, but I really wanted to build the original first, and then we'll probably get the Super Shot down the road. Now, let me give you a quick history on the Hotshot, and these are just going to be release dates and stuff. There was a lot of back and forth with Tamiya and the Hotshots. You know, they released one, and they released another, then they went back, and then they did this, and, you know, it was kind of all over the place for a little bit. And don't mind me if I'm looking down, because I have my notes pinned up over there. So, the original Hotshot came out on part number 58047 in April of 1985. So, in this kit, on the original Hotshot, they had the single front shot and the single rear shot. So a little bit different setup than, you know, what everybody is traditionally doing with dual fronts and dual rears. And, you know, Tamiya did experiment with different shocks and shock setups. I mean, obviously, with like the fighting buggy, that was a whole different ball game that they did with that. But the rear on this one, I know I have not built this yet, so I'm not terribly familiar with it, but it kind of goes from back to front and presses in this way when things are doing all this in the rear. It's, I don't know, I have to build it to figure it out. But, you know, so this was, you know, early 1985. And then the next year, in March of 86, they released the Super Shot. Now, the Super Shot completely did away with the single front and the single rear, and went dual fronts and dual rear shocks. Basically same chassis, just different, you know, front end pieces and rear end pieces to make the front and rear shocks work. But then in May of 87, so 1 year later, they came out with the Hotshot 2, which in the Hotshot 2 has the single front shock and dual rear shocks. So in 3 years, they came up with 3 different suspension geometries and designs for basically the same chassis. The Hotshot was re-released in July of 2007 on this part number 58391. So it's still on the same part number, except now, you know, normally in the North American area, you find it with the -60A, which means it comes with the Hobby Wing ESC in it. So they also, in 2011, released a metallic special version of this. So the whole thing was like a metallic finish, which, you know, would be really cool to have in the collection, but obviously something that would never ever get run. And then in 2012, they re-released the Super Hotshot, and that one is still in production as well. But, you know, just a quick bit of history, and just, you know, changing one thing up over and over again, and kind of, I don't know, I thought it was really interesting. Anyway, guys, I'm not going to do a grand unboxing. I'm just going to do kind of the typical, get it all laid out nice and pretty, run the camera over it, and then I'm going to start building on this guy, and I'll come back once I have something kind of done. I may, if I remember, try to take some pictures along the way and stick them in before I come back. But, you know, once again, if I get wrapped up in, you know, out here building and listening to good music, I may forget. You know, it just kind of sucks me in. All right, guys. All right, guys, so we have the chassis all ready to go. Everything is built, everything is installed, everything seems to be working just fine. Still have to cut out the wing and the body, get that painted, and then get the decals on that. Decals should be, super quick. I've already got them pre-cut. Did that the other night while I was watching some videos, and thankfully the wing is pre-drilled, so that's helpful. The body is not, but should be pretty simple. The only thing I'm worried about is cutting these little slots up here. That looks like that could be kind of a pain in the butt. And those slots basically have to slide over these two rigid pieces, whatever they are, FRP, graphite, whatever. It's not carbon fiber, but it looks like it. Didn't have any issues with the build, really. Everything went together really well. Actually, I had one issue. So this front screw in the plate here, the skid plate up front, it goes into a little hexagon piece of aluminum that is screwed together into the whole front differential casing. So they tell you to put a little, I think it's an 8mm screw in there with thread lock and 2 different washers and everything like that. So no big deal. Got the washers on, got the thread lock on, went to put it in. And you kind of had to feel around to get it started, and I got a couple of turns on it, and it felt like it was going in, and going in, and then just turning. So evidently that you really have to smash everything down, because evidently what I did was it got 2 or 3 threads in there, and I started cranking on it, and it just stripped those threads right out. So what I had to do is put a longer 10mm bolt in there. The problem with that is it goes up and it starts hitting into the transmission case. So I had to put a couple extra little washers underneath of it to get that to back off just enough to where the screw's not really sticking out much, but it's had an extra bit of threading in there to get a hold to put that in. So that was my only issue. Everything else built really well. The shocks are very unique. When you build them and you're hand testing them on the bench, you're like, oh my God, these things are the stiffest things ever. The shock oil is like probably a 80 weight. I mean, it's thick. So the springs on here are also super strong. But, once it's on the bench, it, feels good. I've got it, so right now I've got it set on the medium setting. There's basically a low, a medium, and a high setting. I have it set on the medium setting, and that feels about right. Once you have the battery in there, it has a little bit more weight and wants to squat a little bit. Without the battery, it feels a little stiff, but we'll rock it with the medium at first. The only other goof up I did is there's little tiny stickers on the front and the back of these shocks. And really the only ones you see it on are the back and the front of this one. And, just wasn't paying attention. I put them on the wrong side. So when I went to put the shocks on, everything was upside down. Just read the manual. It tells you what to do. Just, look at it, pay attention. Don't do what I do. I'm sure somebody has pointed this out before, but I did not realize that there was that much, steering wonk with the front end. So if you press on the spring, it raises and lowers the suspension. But I did not realize that, you have to start out with the tires towed in, because once the suspension bottoms out, the tires are like splayed out like this. It's kind of ridiculous. So, not much you can do. I don't know whether I could put lower ball studs on here to help, or, possibly run the ball studs on the bottom. But, it just basically, because you have the steering rods connected in that center, when those arms go up real high, because right now it's sitting level. It's hard to see, but the suspension arms are sitting dead level right now. But when you squeeze the front end, it picks both of the steering arms way up here. And, basically by doing that, it, pulls the inside of those arms in, and you get this. So this is fully released. This is fully compressed. So it is kind of funny to watch. Ha! It's like a dance move. Like I said, I'm sure I've seen it on somebody else's video. I just don't recall it off the top of my head. And then when I built it, I was like, wow. Because in the manual, it tells you to, most of them say, get your steering knuckles straight, get the spindle straight, and, adjust your tie rods to make sure they're dead straight. A little bit of toe in or a little bit of toe out, depending on the vehicle. But this was like, you need to kick this in like a few degrees of front toe in. And I'm like, that seems like an awful lot, but it's not. Believe me, you need that. Because, sitting, kind of at mid compression, the tires are fairly straight. But like I said, once you go down to full compression, so now that I've actually built the car, I can see where, the design of this wasn't spectacular, and where, the chassis failures could happen. Everything is tight back here, but essentially you're on 2 bolts going through a few little pieces of plastic, and then this little tiny FRP brace on the bottom. And that's just everything that's holding the rear end of the car on. And there's not a whole lot more holding the front end of the car on. You basically have a couple screws up here and a couple screws down here, kind of holding that whole front pod to this top deck. This whole lower section down here is just for radio gear, and that's kind of an after all of the rest of the car is built. But, I'm not going to go out there and beat on it. I don't expect anything to break. It's just going to be a kind of a fun runner for me, and definitely, one of the cars from yesteryear that I wanted in the collection. So I'm not going to get the body finished right now. Unfortunately, I have too much stuff going on at the moment. So I will get this cut out, get it painted, and get decals on it very soon. But until then, we'll just leave you guys with kind of the main chassis build part, and then we'll come back once the body is done, kind of give you the full show of the car, and then we'll take it out and run it around the yard and put it around the track a few times. Anyway, guys, everybody out there, you guys be happy, be healthy, be safe, and I will catch you guys next time. See ya. Beep boo, ba boo, boo, ba boo. You go right there for now.